This happened back when I was 17, my last Halloween at home before going away to college. It was Halloween in our peaceful town where nothing bad ever happens. Our house is on the wealthier side of town, and while our house would be described as gorgeous by anyone not from the area, the real head-turner is our next-door neighbor's house. It sits on that line between just a huge house or a mansion. They always go crazy with their decorations for any holiday, specifically Halloween and Christmas. This one year was no exception. By October 1st, they already had all their crazy decorations out. Some houses go the cute and innocently spooky route with smiling ghosts and blow-up decorations, but our neighbors go the actually scary route with fake graves, bloody body bags, and realistic-looking corpses. It draws a lot of attention. People know to drive by and take videos, so it's not uncommon to see cars just sitting in front of their house from time to time. I'll rename my neighbors Mike and Donna just to not blow up their spots even more. Fast forward to Halloween Day. Luckily, it was a Friday that year, so that meant parties and all that could be held on actual Halloween. My dog, Bear, sleeps downstairs in the corner of our dining room, and he woke me up really early, like 4 a.m., barking at something outside. I yelled across the house, "Shut up, Bear!" And my mom came out into the hall and did the same. Bear stopped barking after that, but I had no idea what he was barking at. I fell back asleep quickly after, then woke up to my alarm 2 hours later. I started getting ready for school as my dad was leaving for work, and as he stepped out onto the front deck, he came back in mad and said, "Damn it, Zach, clean up after the dog." He thought I let our dog crap in the front of the house for some reason. I told him I definitely didn't, but he was in a hurry, so he left without more arguing. Next up, it was my turn to leave for school. As I left the house, I got a whiff of something kind of unpleasant. Now, I knew what my dad was talking about, but I didn't see any dog crap anywhere. Later, when I got home around 2, I still smelled that smell. I had no idea what it was, but it was really starting to stink. My parents were both at work. They wanted me to hand out candy when trick-or-treaters started coming. It wasn't until around 4 or 5 that they started showing up. When I opened the door to the first few trick-or-treaters, I'd get a whiff of that increasingly horrible stink. The kids and their parents clearly smelled it too because they were all commenting on it. One parent told me it was even worse next door. I started to know when to expect the doorbell to ring because I'd hear groups of people pointing out how horrible it smelled. At one point, I saw Mike and Donna in front of their house looking around, so I went outside and asked them if they smelled it too, though it was hardly a question because it got worse on their property. It was clearly coming from the front of their property, but there wasn't any dog crap or anything. The smell was coming from one of the body bag decorations. Only, it apparently wasn't a decoration. The couple had a number of fake body bags leaning on things like the mailbox in their front tree, but there was one just lying flat on the ground. Mike said to Donna that he didn't put that one there when she asked. The smell was unbearable from this bag. Mike ran to grab a knife and cut the bag open, and what we saw made me sick. He, of course, cut the top of the bag open, revealing the rotting face of an actual human corpse inside. We all put our hands over our mouths in disgust, wanting to throw up. And of course, there was an audience of kids and parents to see what was going on. It became a huge scene. I called the cops, and their whole front yard literally became a crime scene with people gathering from all over to watch, even though the cops kept telling everyone to clear out. The body was taken away. I told the police that my dog, Bear, was barking last night at 4 a.m., and he may have been barking at whoever dumped the body there. Mike told my dad a week later that the body turned out to be a local 30-something-year-old man who had taken his own life. As for who dropped the body there or why, that's unclear. Mike and Donna are very likable people, so we all think it was somebody who just saw them as a rich, snobby household that overdoes it with the decorations for attention. Obviously, there are some sick people out there. It was 2018 and I was still in middle school at the time. My friend group and I were really excited for Halloween, mostly because we knew this would probably be our last year trick-or-treating, since we were getting too old for it. Our school only had a half day, which was really nice, but we didn't meet up until 5. By then, the sun was starting to set, which got us all more in the mood to go running around and get as much candy as possible. There were 3 of us. all just wearing black clothes with random masks we'd found a couple of days before. It was pretty low effort, but still enough to pass as trick-or-treaters. Anyway, we started by meeting at my house and then made our way through the neighborhood. Our goal was to get to the other side of the neighborhood where there were custom houses on a street where all the rich people lived. It was separated from the rest of the houses and quite the walk, but we knew they'd have to be handing out full-sized candy bars. We stopped by most of the houses on the way there, taking almost 2 hours before we reached the big houses. By then, most of the other kids had gone home, and the sidewalks were mostly empty. It was late since we'd started a bit behind, but it wasn't so late that people would be going to bed or anything. As we walked up to each big house, though, we realized a mistake in our plan. All the houses were really far apart. It took probably 5 minutes of walking to each door, so we had to jog to every house just to get through them all in time. By the time we finished, the last few houses had all their lights off, and no more people were answering their doors. It was just past 9 p.m., so it was really dark and late. We all agreed it was time to go and head back to my house so we could watch some movies and eat some of the candy. But just as we began walking down the street, we saw a man walking toward us. It was way too dark to see what he looked like, but he was definitely an adult wearing a hood that covered his face, and he was alone. It was just us and him on the road. We all felt a little weird that someone would be walking around like that on a holiday when kids were running around, so we moved over to the other side of the road. As we passed the man, he watched us from the other side. He tried to hide it, but it was pretty obvious he was looking right at us. This was really weird behavior, and none of us wanted to stick around, but we were all exhausted from having to run from house to house over the past couple of hours, so we opted for just walking quickly and checking behind us to make sure we weren't being followed. After a few minutes, we felt like we'd put a good distance between us, but out of nowhere, my friend in front stopped abruptly, causing me to bump into him and stumble back. I jokingly called him a few choice words, but when I looked up, I immediately went quiet. There was a hooded man standing at the side of one of the houses ahead, hiding between the trees in the woods just outside of the reach of the streetlights. All we could see was his figure, but from the looks of it, it had to be the same man we'd just seen. He was just standing there, as if he was waiting for us to get closer. We were all whispering to each other as we stood in the road and tried to decide what to do, but there wasn't much to decide on. There was only one way out, which was the way we were heading, so we kept walking, keeping our eyes on the man as we got closer and closer. Just as we were about to pass him, he started quickly walking out of the woods and toward us. All of us started running, making a break for the trees on the other side of the road. We stayed together, running into the woods in the direction that we hoped would lead to the other neighborhood, but the further in we got, the darker and more difficult to navigate it became, especially while running at full speed. After a minute or so, we realized the man had either lost us or stopped following. We took a moment to collect ourselves, leaning up against a tree. Only a minute passed before we heard footsteps in the leaves somewhere out in the woods nearby. We silenced our breathing as best we could and listened as they slowly moved through the dark, eventually fading out. We waited a bit to make sure it was safe, then hurried out of the woods and made it back to my house. None of us had the nerve to call the cops, but we didn't see any other kids outside on our way back, so hopefully they'd already gotten home. We don't know what that man was trying to do, but chasing us into the woods and continuing to try to find us only makes it more terrifying. We stopped going out for Halloween after that, but I still get chills thinking about that night. It was Halloween night and I had to work. I worked with one of those bosses who believed the holidays were a good time to make money, as people were more prone to impulse buying. He also thought that people needed supplies during the day to participate in whatever holiday was currently going on. My boss believed people would need last-minute candy, decorations, and props for their costumes for Halloween. I accepted the overtime since it meant more money, which I really needed at the time. So I waited in the shop for the last-minute shoppers who needed Halloween supplies. My boss wasn't wrong. Last-minute shoppers came in like a flood, and there was a lot of buying going on for much of the afternoon and into the evening. A bit later into the evening, the rush hour thinned, and there were no more customers in the shop. Even the number of people on the streets was dwindling. I decided to look out at the street, and I saw a man leaning against the glass doors, peering inside and staring directly at me. "Can I help you?" I asked, wondering who it was. The person didn't seem to hear me at first because he did nothing but continue to stare through the glass, his breath starting to fog up the door. "Can I help you?" I asked again in a more serious tone. The man seemed to hear me this time around because he moved back a little from the glass, but continued to stare deeply at me. I became really uncomfortable and began to count down the minutes until my shift was over. The man put his hand on the door as if he were about to open it, but then a group of noisy people began walking down the street. He stepped back to let them pass and stared at them as they continued walking before deciding to follow them. I sighed with relief and began to pack up as only a few minutes remained until closing time. My shift ended, and the man from earlier was nowhere to be found. I took it as a good sign and hit the streets, eager to get home quickly. I had only gone a few meters when a shadow from behind loomed ahead of me. It really spooked me, so I jumped back, only to see the man from earlier casually walking toward me. "Who are you, and what do you want?" I asked with a shaky voice. The man didn't reply, but kept his calm pace. I asked again, and he didn't respond. I continued on my journey home and quickened my pace as the strange man continued to follow me. Frightened beyond my wits, I called my older brother, who was home, and told him what was happening. I said the man was still following me, and that he should come get me. My brother met me halfway with a baseball bat, and as soon as the man saw him, he instantly changed directions. That was the last time I would ever work a Halloween shift. I know people do Halloween scare pranks all the time, but I'm telling you, this man wasn't pretending. I could just tell he was dangerous. I always go with my gut feeling, especially when I feel like something is wrong. Better safe than sorry.